Hello, my name is Julie, and welcome to the very first episode of 5-Star Finder. If you followed my reviews over the last 6 months, you may know that I have hit an all-time low in terms of overall quality of my reading. Between September and February, I read 63 books, I believe, and I only rated 2 of them 5 stars. That's awful. That's really bad. September was my worst reading month on record, with the lowest average rating I've ever had. I have really struggled to find favorites since. I've rated a few books, maybe 6 to 8, between a 4 and a 5 star, so around that 4.5 range, but I have been struggling. I have been reading so many books that were 5-star predictions and failing. So I am going to start a series in which I use different metrics to try to pick books that I think will be 5 stars. And we're starting off with the easiest way to do that, and that is by reading authors that I have given 5 stars to before. Have I been doing this already? Yes, and it has been failing, but we're gonna try again. So I'm gonna be reading 3 books. All of these authors have written books in the last 2 years that I have given 5 stars and have been in my top 3 books of the year. They also happen to be each of the author's most recent release. Have I heard as good things about these books as those books that I love? No, unfortunately. I think these books are a little bit more polarizing, but I am still excited for them nonetheless. I think I still have a pretty good chance of liking them. So the first book that I'm going to be reading is Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang. I have read all of R.F. Kuang's previous books. I liked The Poppy War. I appreciated it more than I actually enjoyed it, but Babel was my #1 book of 2023, and I still think about it and how it made me feel all the time. This is going to be pretty different from Babel, but I think it is going to have some of the same sort of scathing commentary that I appreciated a lot, and this has gotten really polarizing views because it is a satire. I think I just found out that this book is signed. This is about our main character, June, who has had a rivalry with this other author, Athena. June is white, Athena is not. And Athena is also more successful than June. And when June sees Athena die very suddenly, she steals her manuscript that was supposed to be her masterpiece, and she says to herself that it's so she can do justice to this work, but she's really going to be taking all of the credit for it. And so this is going to have a bunch of commentary on the publishing industry, and I am so excited. I know that I'm gonna really like the commentary. I think the question is the satire going to be for me? The second book that I'm going to be reading is by one of my favorite thriller authors of all time, and that is Ashley Winstead. She wrote In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, which was my #1 book of 2022. Obsessed from the very first line. I loved that book so much that it is the first book that I ever annotated the first time that I read it. And I also loved The Last Housewife, which was her 2022 release. Gave it 5 stars, but it didn't make my top 10 of the year. And then I'm going to be reading her most recent release, and that is Midnight is the Darkest Hour. This has been the most controversial of her books. I've not heard the most fantastic things, and would this have been a book that I would have picked up were it not her? I'm not sure, but I really have loved the things that I've read from her before, so I'm willing to try. This is about our main character, Ruth, who is a librarian in a small town, whereas there's this local legend of this monster that kills people, and when there are deaths in the community, she ends up trying to investigate the deaths, compare it to the legend, alongside a hot guy. I've heard that this one's a little bit heavier on the romance part of it than her other thrillers have been, and I really liked the romantic element of In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. This has been getting mixed reviews, but I'm still excited. And the last book that I'm going to be reading in this video is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. S.T. Gibson wrote my 3rd favorite book of last year, and that was A Dowry of Blood, which was an indie novel that became so beloved that she became a traditionally published author. She has 2 books that are coming out this year, and this one just was released like a week ago. So A Dowry of Blood is a retelling of Dracula from one of his wives' perspectives, and this takes place in the same universe, but it is not a direct sequel, and it is a reimagining of Carmilla, which is something I know very little about beyond the fact that it is a classic sapphic vampire tale. I didn't need to have read Dracula to enjoy A Dowry of Blood, so I'm going in the same way with this. So our main character, Laura, goes to this elite women's college, and she meets this woman, Carmilla, and she becomes obsessed with her. And there's also Laura's poetry professor, who is also seeming to be obsessed with the relationship between Laura and Carmilla. Dowry of Blood, I wanted to reread upon finishing it, and I have gone back and reread so many scenes. I have loved her writing style and like the atmosphere of it, so I am so pumped for this. If I don't get a single 5-star out of these 3, I don't know what I'm going to do, but we are going to try our hardest to start getting 5 stars in 2024. But I am actually headed out for my spring break. I am out of school now, but some of my friends are still in school, so me and a few of my college friends are going on spring break. We're going to San Francisco, which I have never been before. I have never been west of Ohio before, so this is pretty big for me, and I'm nervous but excited. So I'm gonna take you with me on my trip, and we're gonna start with Yellowface. We're in San Francisco! My friends are right here. He's reading You, Me, and the Nightmare Painter. How's this going?
Fantastic. I love this book.
He wasn't liking the beginning of it, but he's liking it now, and that makes me excited. I haven't read it yet. I finished a different book on the first leg that we had, but I got over 50% of the way through Yellowface on the second plane, and I'm kind of obsessed. This book is making me so angry. I mean, obviously that's the point of like this character being so fucking racist and you're following her. Because she thinks she's fine, but she's the villain. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm totally a liberal. And then she doesn't see other people as people. And oh my God, it's like watching, oh my God, what's that movie? What's the Scarlett O'Hara movie?
I don't know who that is.
It's like watching it's like watching Gone with the Wind for the first time and following a character that's doing all these terrible things and you just have to go along with it. And it has gone faster than I thought it was in terms of like how things are building, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I don't really have guesses, but we've gotten to the point where she has met up with Athena's ex-boyfriend. So I'm ready for things to get batshit, and if she doesn't get her retribution, I'm gonna scream. Today, we don't really know what we're doing because every one of our plans has changed, so we'll see, and I'll check in with you later.
Hey, it's me. I'm coming at you from the Golden Gate Bridge. San Francisco's going great, and the book is going even better. It's getting fucking crazy, and I don't really know how much further it's gonna go. I've got probably about 60 pages left, so it won't be hard to finish it. I have zero predictions. I love how crazy she is and how it's just following such a terrible person who doesn't see she's a terrible person. I just think R.F. Kuang has such an interesting way of telling stories. And yeah, so I'm gonna get back inside the car. Welcome to SFL. It's 5 a.m. We have been here for a bit, so I'm exhausted, but I got my chai. I previously updated you, but I'm unsure I can use the footage. So, the other day, I did finish Yellowface. What did I think? My only complaint is that I do think that the ending didn't exactly fit the pace or the stakes of the rest of the book. Things about the ending that I did like, but it didn't feel like it built upon the rest of the book like the book had done the whole rest of the thing. It's just a character study. I appreciated that it was actually a pretty short book. R. Kwong was just to the point about what she wanted to get across in this book, and it's about this character and how she thinks that she's okay. She thinks that she's the main character. She thinks that everything that she doesn't have has been taken away from her by other people in a really vindictive way that a lot of people, white people, actually believe and they don't realize is wrong. She thinks that Athena gets everything because she's diverse and not because she's a talented author, and we can even see from the book that no, Athena is just a more talented author than June is. But even Athena isn't perfect. And I didn't think R.F. Kuang would, but making sure that she's not angelicized was a good thing, and that there were critiques of Athena that were fair, but some of the critiques of Athena aren't, and June still takes them as fact, and anything that doesn't fit into June's worldview is wrong and made fun of. And I think Arkwon just did a really good job of showing us June's point of view while showing us how it's wrong. But I did start Midnight as the Darkest Hour. I didn't get very far because I haven't had much of an opportunity to read in the last day, but I do have some reservations so far. We're set in a very small southern town. Our main character is a preacher's kid, and she also is the librarian and has taken solace in books because that's the only thing that she can do to live her life freely, because her family is extremely religious and hard on her. There's something that happens in the first 20 pages that actually isn't in the synopsis of the book but is very important to it. But I think that we're going to have another interesting female protagonist. I'm worried about the love interest because I know that this one's heavier on the romance than her other thrillers, and I'm worried about the implications of this guy. I think I've heard stuff about being compared to Twilight. We've already referenced Twilight in the book and talked about how that was such an important book to her, but I don't want this man to be like a werewolf. You know what I mean? He immediately walks into her house and is like, why does it smell like a man in here? And a man hasn't been in there in days, and she's like, why is his nose even better than I remembered? And I'm like, something about that is creepy and I don't like it. I'll probably get a ton of reading done, and I won't update you until I'm back in my hometown. Hello, I'm back in my hometown as promised, hanging out with my mom for her birthday, staying the night. I still have a break tomorrow, but I am going back to work the day after. And on the plane, I did get most of the way through Midnight is the Darkest Hour, and I have about 70 pages left. This is my least favorite of her thrillers so far. I definitely do think I was right when off the bat I was saying that I wasn't really connecting to the characters, feeling the characters, because it is so very much about Ruth, the main character, and Everett, who is the best friend of many years when this crime has been announced. I feel like the synopsis for this book was misleading in a couple of ways. This is set up as a little bit more of a traditional mystery thriller, even though her other books haven't been. And because of that, like, plot twist or thing that's not in the synopsis, but is within the first 30 pages, I feel like this is a different book than one thinks that they're going to get into. Not necessarily in a bad way. Like, I think that it should have been in the synopsis to give a little bit more of a set of a tone. Like, I would have read this book no matter what the synopsis is. The other two of her thrillers have had a female character who sometimes does the wrong thing and maybe often does the wrong thing, and she is taking down some larger system or addressing it. So the first one, a lot of that has to do with classism, and the second book has to do with patriarchy, sexual assault, gender essentialism. And this book is dealing with religious trauma, and I just don't think that this is being done as well as the other ones. I don't really see Ruth as a 3D character. I don't believe that she's as God-fearing or was raised as God-fearing as she claims she is. So next time I update you, I will have finished this book, but I'm not going to be giving it a 5-star. So you know what? We have had at least one win in this video, so I went into this knowing that it probably wasn't going to be my favorite. It has been, of what I've seen, nobody's favorite Ashley Winstead. I don't know, it's really hard to put my fingers on like what's not working. I'm just not connecting to anything. I don't think anything's as well developed. I'm not as connected to the writing style, and it just seems to be like a mass weakening. It's just not done as much as I think that it could have, given like the setup of what our character has gone through. Sometime tomorrow I will have finished it, and I'll let you know what I thought. Have you ever been reading a book and you see that there's a good amount left in the book, and you flip the page at the end of a chapter and then you realize that that was the end of the book and there's just extra stuff at the back? That's what just happened with me. While the ending does make sense and it was like, oh, where could this possibly go from here? There isn't anywhere for it to go from there. That's the end. I don't think there was anywhere else for the characters to go. It became pretty clear that that was the only available avenue for this book to go. I like the final confrontation that Ruth has with her family and really talking about the way that the church has been like taking advantage of people. But because this is like the background of this is being around this religious town and how this pastor has been the one that is taking advantage of other people, I kind of wish there was more commentary about the religious aspect of it and how he has been using the fear of this new revivalist church to make people do what he wants him to do. And how, like, the bad people in the town, the men that want to take power, have been using that. I think the best aspect of it was the mystery type plot that she is investigating, but I do think the synopsis was misleading on that, because it says that Ruth, who is the librarian, is investigating what the low man has to do with the death, and how people are thinking that the low man has to do with the death. But the low man is so minor to this book. It is a footnote, if anything, and she knows so much more that she doesn't have to investigate into the low man. From the very beginning, we know that Ruth knows a lot more than that, so it doesn't make sense for that to be the synopsis. I just wasn't really invested in the characters. I think we went on about Everett for way too long, and the other 2 books that I read from her, I felt so much more invested in the characters even when they did things that were wrong. Versus this book, I don't feel like it was earned. So I'm probably giving this like a 3. I'm disappointed, but not as much as I would have been had I read it upon its release and not heard any reviews. I do not currently have an Education in Malice with me. It is at my apartment and I'm driving there tonight. So I'll either start it tonight or finish something else and then start it in the next couple days, and you'll see me then. After a very long day of errands, I stayed up late to finish the first 100 pages of An Education in Malice, and I am liking it just a hair less than the first book, but the fact that I'm liking it pretty close to how much I liked A Dowry of Blood, I'm happy with this so far. It's set at a small college for girls in the 60s in Massachusetts. Laura is a girl from Mississippi who hasn't gone anywhere, and she really wants to work on her poetry, and she enrolls in a program that's supposed to be just for upperclassmen, but she was accomplished enough that she got in, and there is a very intimidating female professor who seems ageless and demanding and always looking for the best and the brightest. And there's also Carmilla, who is a senior at the school, and she is the professor's favorite, and Laura's kind of starting to overtake that favoritism, and they're starting to be on the same level, and they have a very taut rivalry while they're also obsessed and really into each other. Something about the way that S.T. Gibson writes relationships, you can really feel just the taut strings between them, and I really, really like that. The writing style is great as always. It's clear that she's a fan of poetry in the way that she writes. As always, I really like a book about writers. I don't necessarily love a book about readers or a love of books. I love stories that are about a love of writing. I also didn't know that this is dual perspectives, so we are seeing from Laura's and Carmilla's perspectives, mostly Laura. We're seeing how bad the professor is through Carmilla's eyes. Even though she's obsessed with the professor, we see how much she's being taken advantage of and how, you know, this woman is literally a vampire in a way that Laura wouldn't see until later. So I kind of understand why that choice was made, but I'm interested to see how that's going to play out in the future. I'm definitely hooked so far, and I just want to know, why is the font so big? I don't understand why fonts and like margins and stuff aren't a little bit more standardized. Like, this says it's 350 pages, but it's definitely closer to like 250 if you compare it to the last couple books that I read. Having a good time. I'll see you tomorrow. It is the next day, and last night I did get to page 200 of like 340 of An Education in Malice, and this book's going great. It's going great. I don't know where I saw a poor review of this book, but it really got to me. And I was so worried that I wasn't going to like this book, and I'm really enjoying it. It's not quite as much as A Dowry of Blood. And I think that's because Dowry of Blood is a much more like isolated book and singularly focused, versus this book is a little bit more of a traditional novel in which we have, you know, a setting that we're introduced to and more than a couple characters that we're introduced to, but we still have the same tone and emotions that are going on. I think this is correctly identified as a companion. This makes me feel a lot of the same ways that I felt reading A Dowry of Blood, but it is just a different setup of story.
So I'm over halfway through. Believe it or not, Carmilla's turned into a vampire. If she wasn't a vampire before, she was going to become a vampire. So I think this is really interesting based on my knowledge of Carmilla, how S.T. Gibson is inserting this other character that is the villainous character into the relationship between these two. And the relationship between Laura and Carmilla is so intoxicating in the way that I feel like A Dowry of Blood did as well. I mean, if you're a really big fan of like the knife to throat, enemies or rivals to lovers type thing, this is a book you should be reading. Because that's a trendy thing right now, a lot of authors are doing it, and a lot of authors are missing a lot. They are making it like, oh my god, we hate each other for one chapter, and then they're obsessed with each other and they just like each other and they're nice to each other. It's like, no. These people, like within like the same sentence, they're like, I hate this person, I want to take them to bed. And I think the way that she does that actually makes sense. Because a lot of the times, especially in a realistic setting, in a fantasy setting, it's one thing, you know? But in a realistic setting, it doesn't make sense that those things happen. But I think the way that she writes, it's very clear, and it makes sense for these characters who are so cutthroat, want to do anything for XYZ. The thing that is the most remarkable about this book is the writing style, specifically the imagery and metaphor that she uses. It is so specific and contributes to the tone. It doesn't take you out of it. Comparisons that I've never heard made before. There were so many that are taking me aback there, but there were a couple that I marked. Once I realized I wanted to mark them. She lay beside me, wrapping her body around mine like the choking ivy that wrapped around her apartment building. I nestled into her arms, letting her embrace me in a way I imagined the grave embraced dead bodies. It's so Bronte-coded. Literally within the same chapter, real fury passed across Laura's face like a parcel of clouds blocking out the sun, and for a moment she was Athena incarnate. This was the ferocious creature I had encountered in the shadows outside the party, the goddess that lived within the girl. This was the woman who would unapologetically torment a lover for the sake of her own satisfaction, who would demand nothing less than total submission. But then the moment passed, and Laura swallowed hard, taking a step back. Does that not tell you literally, like, she's not describing the scene, but she is telling you so much about what it looks like and how it feels. And this is just the entire book. And it's so good. I really like it. Like I said, I like Dowry of Blood just a smidge more. But I think maybe if I read An Education in Malice first, I might not have the same opinion. I might be seeing her do all these things for the first time and be like, wow, this is astonishing. And see Dowry of Blood and be like, okay, this is hitting the same notes as An Education in Malice. But because it's not new, it takes it just that hair down. I couldn't sleep last night, so I accidentally slept most of the day away, but I am still planning on finishing it today. And I am also planning several other 5-Star Finder videos, and I'm kind of struggling with picking which ones I like more and most. So which ones I'm gonna do next. So if you have any ideas of things you'd like me to do, I do have a list. I have a list of like probably 7 videos I could do. But if you have something that you're thinking of that would be, wow, that'd be really cool, let me know.
There's only 40 pages left. Not a whole lot of time for something to happen. I did it. I have finished An Education in Malice. This is great. It was really good. I am probably gonna give it like a 4.5. I don't think it really escalated much from where I last talked to you. It did exactly what I thought it was going to do. It has a little bit of, not quite a mystery plot going on, but there is an external plot to just the relationship between the two girls. That plot had to be wrapped up. I really, really love her language. I really like the relationship between the two of them. And honestly, this could have been longer. I could have seen even more. That external plot with the professor and what the professor's doing resolves without many steps or without a lot of complication. and I think we could have had a little bit more struggle that way. But I think that the author did what she set out to do. Like I said before, if this was the first time I had read this world and this vibe and this tone, because it is a indirect sequel, I think it would have been a full 5, but I expected this to punch even farther than A Dowry of Blood is, to try to get out of its shadow a little bit. And I don't know that it got that far, even if I do think it lived up to the first book. So this is still really good. I'm still very glad I own it. I'm putting it as a win. It's one of my favorite books that I've read this year, so that counts for something. So now that I've finished all 3 of these books, what did we learn? Well, in our first episode of 5-Star Finder, we have a 5-star, a 3-star, and around a 4.5. What I learned with Yellowface was, even if this is a departure from R.F. Kuang's earlier works, this still felt like her. It still had a lot of her same commentary. And I think it really showed a behind-the-scenes peek at things that have happened in her life that she wasn't able to talk about in her previous books because maybe they hadn't happened yet, or those are fantasy and not as connected to real life. What I learned from Midnight is the Darkest Hour is, even if it is an author that you've loved before, not being interested in a synopsis might be a good indicator of the rating regardless. I don't think that this was nearly as successful as her other books. I just don't think she did what she set out to accomplish. And with this one, sometimes a companion book is okay. I was a little bit worried because I'm not one for companions and like going by the coattails of success instead of trying out something new, but I think that this was a story that deserved to be told just as much as A Dowry of Blood. So we had 2 wins and a loss. That's not bad at all, and that's tripling the amount of favorites that I've had this year. And the next couple of books that I'm going to be reading this month, I am not so sure they are going to be 5 stars. I have reasons to think that I won't like them as much, but maybe my luck will continue. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to watch out for the next episode of 5-Star Finder. I don't know when it'll happen next. I'm thinking end of April, maybe early May. If you'd like to follow me anywhere, my Goodreads, my Instagram, my book club, my Etsy, where I have reader spreadsheets and bookish crochet dolls, all of that stuff is in the one link in the description. And as always, I will see you in the next one.